Yes, Coffee Conversations with Greg J is on. Good morning, good morning, good morning. We are up, grand rising. We are focused, we are purposed, and we are walking in the light. I hope you're doing the same in these crazy and unprecedented times. A lot of things, as we almost always say with every show, a lot of things going on in Coffee Conversations with Greg J is a place where we have culturally relevant conversations about a variety of topics from a decidedly global perspective, which brings us to today's topic. And that is President Trump's Oval Office ambush of South African President Cyril Ramaphosa. Uh, Cyril Ramaphosa went into the Oval Office on a state visit, had some of his cabinet members there. Minister of Agriculture is one of note that was in there with him, speaking with Trump. And Trump decided to play videos and show pictures accusing South Africa of murdering farmers in South Africa and taking their land. And his tone was just so full of vitriol. And as I think about this occurrence and watching it play out, it's all over social media if you haven't seen it yet. The tone that he is speaking to President Ramaphosa is that one of supremacists. And the content in which he's speaking about is one that is full of hypocrisy. Why? Well, that's what we're going to talk about this morning. Got PastorKelvin Sauls with us. Good morning, my brother.
Good morning, man. Good to be with you.
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
and, uh, glad we can
Wow.
continue.
Okay, so
Glad we
look,
can
you
continue.
saw the video. I know you did. Look, if President Ramaphosa was not playing, he's not scared of Trump.
No, he is not. I think, one thing Ramaphosa always says is, he's been taught diplomacy by Madiba, right?
Mm,
And I think, and always cool heads prevail.
yeah,
And when you know that truth is on your side, you don't have to be disrespectful, disruptive. In fact, you don't have to be deceptive, right? Because truth is on your side. But I think, Greg, so glad to be with you, just to chop it up with you, in terms of just all of this that's been happening. I watched it live, because I got several communiques. Hey, are you aware that Ramaphosa just arrived at the Oval Office? And it was actually, live on YouTube because the other U.S., networks went in and out. But others just kept it going, which is really, I think, what the showman, right, President Trump, wants. But he got a rude awakening, you see, in there. So, I mean, Ramaphosa being ambushed by well orchestrating, Oval Office meeting, talking points from every forum, and Elon Musk, who happens to be present there as well. It just really, Greg, amplified just the deceptive narratives, right? Perpetuated, by the White House and that sons of apartheid, Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, that he is, surrounded himself with, and just shows the hypocrisy.
So, this is what I wanted to cover on today. I wanted to remind our audience of, the reason we say hypocrisy, it's just the tone in which he used in speaking to President Ramaphosa, showing him pictures, showing him a video. I mean, look, let's remind the people about, the Sharpeville massacre, the Soweto massacre, which is the one that touches my heart so much. All the times I've been to South Africa, every time I visit the Hector Peterson Museum, it brings me to tears. Why? Because those children are right at my same age group. And, it's interesting that let's just start there. Here we are in 1976. The students are protesting because they want to, they need their textbooks in their native languages as opposed to Afrikaans. And they take to the streets. Police are called. Police shoot into the crowd, and more than 400 children are killed. That's the headlines of it. It's a massive massacre. You know, there's stories like that all through the history and the journey towards social justice, towards liberation in South Africa. And for Trump to sit there and accuse, I don't care if it's Ramaphosa or any official of racial prejudice, it's just hypocrisy times 10. You know, what is your talk about the Soweto massacre and how you feel about that particular day?
Yeah, I think it's what happened there. Really, for me, was white fragility and hypocrisy on steroids. Let me just put it that way, right? And I don't think we have to just go back to 1976. Neither should we just go back to the Sharpeville massacre, which we need to let folk know was a protest in one of the communities on the southern side of Johannesburg called Sharpeville, where really I really kin that march to the one in Memphis, Greg, where we with Dr. King our brothers and sisters wore I Am a Man. Sharp was a similar piece where actually the women took the lead in that one, saying that we are human beings, we are natives of this land, and we will not walk around with a document that gives us permission as to where our whereabouts would be and where we need to be. It was really, again, organized by my man right here, Robert Sobukwe, right? In the Pan-Africanist Congress, it was really saying we are human beings, and this is our native land, and we can be wherever we need to be. So, but again, also, Greg, we just can't go back to that. We must really understand, that what Trump is trying to do is weaponize, the reparative work going on in South Africa, right? And that reparative work is not just about what happened, in 76 or what happened at the Sharpeville massacre, but really what happened 300 years ago, in 1650, when 3 ships with settlers, landed, on the southern tip, of Africa after being lost. One of them was shipwrecked, and they encountered the indigenous Khoisan people. That's when the genocide, the true genocide, started. So you are absolutely right about the hypocrisy. And as I said earlier on, this is, white insecurity, white fragility, and white supremacist hypocrisy on steroids, right? In terms of that. So I think you are absolutely right, around that. We have to put this within a historical context. And the other things I'll just quickly say is we have to understand how empire work. We have to understand how, settlers and colonizers work. They work on the basis of 5 Ds, right? Very important. The first one is, the first D is deception. They're going to lie about a lot of stuff, period, because they don't want us to know what they've done. And you see the same thing happening in the U.S. right now with us, as Africans in this land, right? The second D is, denial. They're going to deny what has happened, and these narratives are the same, with the descendants of settlers in South Africa saying, well, we didn't do the genocide. Why are you coming after us? Our ancestors did that. Don't you hear the same story over here when we talk about reparations? Oh, no, we didn't do it. And people don't know, that the flip side, of generational wealth is generational trauma. You see, in terms of the third D, after, deception and denial is division.
Yes.
You see, how they seek to divide and conquer around that. The next one, after division is distraction, which is what the Oval Office meeting was all about. It's part of that distraction piece too. You see, it picks up that, it picks up on the deception piece. It picks up on the division piece around that. And then, the final D is then going in for the kill, which is destruction, around that. And so I think, I'm glad we can put all of it in that context, and so people have to really, understand, South African, history. And there is a documentary out right now. It was shown, about this. It was shown at the Pan-African Film Festival. The two of us, that's one of our favorite festivals right here, with Babu and the whole team doing an extraordinary job telling stories from around the continent and the diaspora. And it was called South Africa, A Decolonized History. And we may want to try to see, Greg, at some point, if we can just do another screening. We did a screening of it, on Freedom Day on April the 27th with the filmmaker from South Africa present. She was there in conversation with us. And I just really think we need to go ahead and continue just to educate folk about the context, because what happened in that Oval Office really, was, you're right, hypocrisy, and also not just that, the images that were shown, one, and two, the some of the hard copies printed out, right? Nobody could send the links to the president. Right? He had to print it out and hand. Some of it was even deceptive. You see, reports are coming out now. The BBC just had a report where they went to that place where he showed a video of the so-called, grave sites, right? And interviewed, the farmers, you see, right there. And they confirmed that was just a protest, you see, staged because it happened, in that particular community. So again, the deception, is just, yet another distraction, and I'll talk a little bit more about what other geopolitical distractions, he's trying to do.
I saw a snippet of the video there, and it's not lost on me that the speech maker was Julius Malema from the EFF, right? And so, in South African politics, let's just, describe to the people what it is. It's, that's the opposition to the ANC, right? And so it's like Cyril Ramaphosa is from the ANC, Julius Malema is from the EFF, and they have different approaches.
Julius Malema comes from the ANC.
He comes from the ANC.
Yeah, he was the under Mandela. After Mandela, he was the leader of the Youth League, which is what Mandela was. For the ANC. So he has those roots, and he's just really walking on a whole different path, which is grounded in reparations.
Yes. I mean, they have, and a lot of people, when you talk to your South African friends, a lot of people follow him. A lot.
The song that he refers to, which is Kill the Boer, it's a freedom song. It's a struggle song, right? When you are under oppression, when you are under marginalization, when you are going through, a violent, going through state violence, right? Just like what the spiritual did for us here, right? We had freedom songs, and I want to refer people to a powerful documentary that talks about the freedom songs called Amandla. If nobody has seen the documentary Amandla, it really chronicles the role that music played, right? In, the struggle for freedom in South Africa. From Zenzeni now, what have we done, to the one that he uses there. And part of these songs are really, it's allegorical, right? Part of these songs are, how do we nurture each other? How do we build resilience in our resistance, around that? And so I think, we can never let oppressors come and tell us, which songs we can and cannot sing. We are not into appeasement. What we are into is restorative and reparative justice by any means necessary.
Yeah, absolutely, without question. And then too, I noticed in the video, this spurred the question in my heart. They show the masses of the people doing the toi toi,
Yeah.
and so why does that? I actually happen to have perceived that this strikes fear into the hearts of white South African. Tell me why.
Well, we again put it into context. Remember, the strategy in South Africa, just as it is in the United States, is anything that can that can be used to justify the deceptive narrative of the black danger, right? Or as they said, the swart gevaar, right? So that was just the toi is a dance of resistance, but not just that, it's a dance of reimagination. Very important. We resist the structure of oppression, but we reimagine, a new South Africa. And so it's a combination of a song for justice, but also, it's about joy in terms of saying, and of course that gets taken out of context by a people who has been settlers, a people who's been oppressors, exploiters, and who has dispossessed, South Africans of their land, engaged, in both enslavement as well as, genocide of the indigenous people, enslavement, of people from Asia, so we deal with enslavement where human trafficking took place into South Africa, right? And West Africa, it took place, you see, through the Middle Passage, around that. So the toi, and we still do it, today. I mean, when we get excited about something, whether we are at a party or whether we are celebrating, something, because again, it is a dance during our marches of resistance and a dance of reimagination. The resistance is to oppression, right, or any type of injustice, and the reimagination, through joy of what can be. It's a reimagination and an aspiration of what can be, and we still do that today because of the journey that we continue to be on towards our complete, collective liberation.
Let's look at another optic that I think it's important to highlight here in this discussion and inform the people. Now Trump is enabling where he's taking in the refugees from South Africa, the white farmers, and because he's saying they're being oppressed by the black government and all of that. And the pictures that I see are farmers or settlers that are in almost military type clothing is what I noticed. And I do know that, okay, so listen, folks, let's remember South Africa won its independence by straight up war. This is what happened. It was war. I mean, Cuba sent troops. It was the real deal, okay? The real war, not just protests like what we do. They went to battle. And they won their independence, their freedom in this way. There are Afrikaners, Boers, who do not think that the war is over, and their daily dress is still military-like because they are waiting for it to jump off at any moment, and they're saying that they're prepared. These are the people that Trump is trying to bring over into the United States. And I personally feel it's because they're trying to refill their ranks of white supremacists. But isn't that an important observation to have there, Pastor Sauls? Like, you know who they try to bring over here.
You hit the nail on the head, brother. Look, I think it's very important to say that not all Afrikaners are Boers, which is Boer is a term for farmer. So it's not necessarily a derogatory term. It's just a Afrikaans term for farmer. So not all Afrikaners are farmers. That's very, very important. And not all farmers are white. I mean, our ancestors have worked that land for years, brother, before the settlers got here. I mean, and one can see that, through the history of the indigenous people, but also, the history of, our Bantu speaking, siblings, came from the north, west around that. But one thing we have to be clear is, Trump's fake Afrikaner quote refugees, and I don't even want to use that term because it's a derogatory. Well, I don't want to use that term because it is an incorrect term for refugees, that receive TPS, whether they come from Haiti, whether they come from the Congo, whether they come from Afghanistan, etc., etc. I mean, when these folks showed up, you can tell, they've been eating good. They've had a okay, they don't necessarily, even look like refugees. So that's why I say, Trump's fake Afrikaner refugees, and then don't forget, and the allegations of genocides, right? Very important, are pawns and props for ongoing disinformation and deception through distraction campaigns. Very important. And the power play by white nationalist groups in South Africa. That's very, very important. And these nationalist groups are fascists. They are white supremacists, okay? And these are the folk that he's trying to make room for in the United States. So we have to be very, very clear about, the heritage of these, Afrikaners. Remember, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, Elon Musk doing that Hitler, sign. That's the heritage and the legacy of Afrikaners. They are fascists and white supremacists, and the only political system they understand is racial capitalism, right? And that system is a system that's anti-black and that is built on black and on the exploitation you see on of black people. So this thing about the term refugees and the term genocide, again, you see that's being used, right? When an act of genocide right now is taking place, you see, and that should not be lost on us, sisters and brothers, because these, fake African refugees are props in Trump's geopolitical revenge, very important, towards South Africa for taking the government of Israel, right, to the International, Court of Justice, right, for the real and active genocide, genocidal acts of ethnic cleansing on Palestinians. So you see that we got to really make sure we connect the callous and destructive dots, you see, that Trump is trying to make here in terms of that. And on our last time together, we did talk about the legislation making its way, through, the House of Representatives right now around a punitive, bill, that was introduced, you see, to punish South Africa. That's why the South African president comes and he says, here's the focus, you see, of this meeting, and really doing what a leader, would do. The meeting is going to be dealing with multifaceted topics, urgent topics, relevant topics that will reset the relationship, right? And childishly, you have this pouting president, you see, that gets stuck on deceptive and denialist and divisive, you see, issues, right? Just further, that mega agenda, make apartheid great again, in a transnational way, in terms of.
So also I'm listening to you and I'm just reminded, right when the Ukraine-Russia war broke out and the United States was encouraging the world to support Ukraine and go against Russia. And there was a very deep speech. I mean, I watched the whole thing of Julius Malema. It touched my heart. And he was saying, no to the United States, we will not go against Russia. And he broke it down. He said, because when we needed your support for apartheid, Russia supported us and you didn't. And I'm like, it's plain and simple. The United States was very slow to support the abolishment of apartheid. It took the private sectors. Really, you had Trans World with Randall Robinson, Trans Africa with Randall Robinson. You had the academic community with divestment. Started out there at UCLA, approaching companies to divest their resources out of the economy of South Africa. This is what made us in the U.S. support.
Remember, Reagan did not want to sign that legislation around sanctions, right? And Congress, 2/3 majority, basically was overriding, that legislation for that to take place. So that was the same thing with Nelson Mandela's interview with Ted Koppel. Yeah. You see, to say, we South Africa, to maintain its sovereignty and its, autonomy and its integrity, we are not. South Africa will not, and there are several other leaders saying the same thing. We are not, going to respond when the USA jump, and we're going to ask how high. Yeah. You see, there is a movement right now, a Pan-African movement for true unity, right? As Bob Marley sings about, so that we can really come to terms with who we really are. Happy birthday, Malcolm X, 100 years old. Malcolm X, right? We are not outnumbered. We are out-organized. Now is the time, you see, for some serious and strategic Pan-African organizing and mobilizing so that we can reposition ourselves for resistance and reinforce our resilience to reimagine, you see, who we need to be for such a time as this.
Yeah, we just want everybody to be reminded that we did stand with South Africa. That's just a little bit more than 30 years ago. It's like, it's not that long ago, y'all. It was in your lifetime, right? And then when you visit South Africa, you can still see the vestiges of apartheid, the separation. When you hit that apartheid museum and you understand, just how deep the apartheid policy really, really was. Now, Pastor Sauls, I don't know if you do this, but there's a controversy I found out about the Grammy Award winning South African artist Tim's. There's a controversy out there because she said that she's colored. And Tyler, yes, thank you, yes. And so she says she's colored, and Black Americans are letting her have it because she's using that term. And let's explain to the people how apartheid resulted in these designations and what a colored person is.
Yeah, I think let me start by just saying that I really want to caution our African American siblings, not to feel like we can tell people how to identify themselves. I think that's very, very important, especially when it's built on a painful history of discrimination and dehumanization. I think that's very, very important. As we move into a global, African diaspora conversation and collaboration, which is taking place, with our siblings, in South America, Central America, North America, and the continent, is very, very important that we understand how the oppressor, in so many ways, has, divided us, right, and given us certain, and let me say, foisted certain identities, on us. I would really encourage us to ask more questions, seek more clarification than engage in condemnation. I just want to say that, and anybody can take me on that, because I've worked now, within the Pan-African American, and the Black immigrant, space for the last 20 plus years, and allowing people to self-identify is very, very important because it's part of their, dealing with post-traumatic slave syndrome. You see, in terms of
I think that this topic here comes with a measure of education, because every tour group that I've taken over to South Africa, when they hear that, it is always a huge discussion among the group, because we need to have understanding. Like, what do you mean?
Yeah, we really have to be, each other's teachers and each other's students. Because again, colonization has educated me about African Americans, so I had to be decolonized, and vice versa. Colonization has taught African Americans about Africans, and we have to decolonize them. We have to deconstruct that, reconstruct it, for us to be able to approximate, you see, with integrity. So the colored piece, remember, when apartheid, let me say, when colonization came to a head, in 1948, in being solidified, as the system of apartheid, which just basically means keep people apart, teach them false narratives about one another, and then also train them how to hate one another. You see, that's really what apartheid was about. It was thriving on the vision and the deception, you see, of what a classification was foisted on you, right? And so apartheid had different racial classifications. That's very, very important, you see. And part of the racial classifications, was based on, what came out of, the mixing of, right, indigenous people, with European people, right? And then Asians were brought by way of, human trafficking to South Africa, to Cape Town especially, to fulfill basically the labor, because indigenous people were in so many ways, killed off. And then you have the movement, of course, of, Bantu speaking, Africans that then moved down. So there's all this mixing, you see, going on. And 1948 is the culmination of British and Dutch, French, you see, settlers, really, competing about, how who can treat, right, the indigenous people, the worst, right, including those who came, again, by way of enslavement from, Asia, and then later on by way of indentured servanthood from India, right? In terms of that, and so they came up with names, right? For these classifications, very, very important classifications, and so apartheid was a very paternalistic system, right? In terms of who's on top and who's at the bottom. But the main thing about it is foisting an identity that is deceptive, foisting an identity to facilitate division, and foisting an identity that will be a distraction and deny people of the truth about what was done to their ancestors, who they are, and how they need to fit in society, right? And so colored people, that was one of those, ethnic classifications. That's very, very important. And it's not just about, the coming together of Europeans, and Black folk. The history of coloreds can be traced back to the indigenous Khoisan people. That's very, very important. A lot of people don't want to talk about that. When I do my immersive and educational, trips to South Africa, Greg, I start with the history of the indigenous people, so that people can get to know and understand that ultimately it is not about skin pigmentation. You see what I'm saying? Because the indigenous Khoisan people, they weren't necessarily Black, right? But they were the indigenous people. So I think, we ought to not get too caught up, you see, on color, even though, color is very, very important, you see, but it has to be only important around how it conscientizes us to come together to fight and work for our collective, freedom. And so that classifications that apartheid did created cultures.
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You see,
Well,
and so, with this identity foisted, you see, upon, quote, coloreds, they created a culture, and many who were classified as colored in so many ways still maintain, politically speaking, a black consciousness, such as Ellen Busa, such as my family. You see, in terms of that. So when we talk about it, we say, I am a South African with a colored orientation and a black consciousness. You see,
it's interesting. I had an opportunity in South Africa.
Let me just say this: all of our ancestors contributed to the liberation movement because many of them ended up on Robben Island. Well, in terms of that, so we just have to, understand that. So I hope that's helpful for people.
No, that's very, very helpful. I want to share a couple stories here on this topic. I mean, generally speaking, what I tell my tour groups is, okay, the lighter skinned ones, y'all are colored, and they always like, what do you mean, I said, y'all ain't even black, you colored over there, and we go, this is a great opener, to study the history and what that thing is all about, right? And I'll tell you a story. In Cape Town, there's a clothing store that we like to take our group to. And so because on this particular year, I had been there so many times, I was just outside waiting on, the ladies to shop and, get their stuff out of there. And I met a woman who was like what we would call the meter maid. She's basically checking the parking on the street. And so, we got into a conversation, and she started the conversation asking me if she moved to the United States and married a white man, what would her baby be considered? And I said black. And she was just really fascinated by that. She was not colored. It's like, no, black, And we started talking about colored. And I shared with her, I said, well, I mean, over in America, they black, and she just could not believe it. So we sat there on this busy street, long street in Cape Town. People that were walking by, she would point them out and say colored. I go, oh no, black, and she was just having a really, really good time with that. And she was like, what about him? I said, oh, that's black man right there. She's like, no, he's colored. That was really, really something.
And that's why, I mean, in the end, it is about getting to know, understand each other's cultural context.
Yeah.
You see, so color, is really, for me, it's an external opening for an in-depth conversation. You see, in terms of that. And there's a publication, called Africa, is a Country, and they just released a very, very powerful article, and I'll send it to you, and you can put it in, in as a resource. I've named several resources for people because I'm an educator. I'm a cultural, educator, and because others have educated me about what does it mean to be a Black South African in the United States, and contributing to our ongoing struggle for liberation here. And that article is called Afrikaners, right? Afrikaners. And the first paragraph says the first group of people who called themselves Afrikaners were Olam's people, who would be called colored in South Africa today.
Wow.
And I'll send it to you again. The education is just so important and so vast. And then, there's a book that I'll send to you. A colleague of mine, Dylan, Valley from Cape Town, who's a documentarian, posted, a book, called about, entitled, I think, the real genocide in South Africa, right? Which was against the indigenous people. So when you talk about genocide, you see what I'm saying, of Afrikaners, you can, if you know the history, see, you can look at that, in different ways. And so the depth and breadth of history that apartheid and white Afrikaners sought to hide and to take out the books. That's why they had Bantu education, because it was the miseducation of the black. in South Africa. You see what I'm saying? Help me out, Lauren Hill. And what that book was based on, in terms of the miseducation of the Negro, it's really just, and it's the task, man, is an ongoing deconstruction of deceptive narratives and a reconstruction of truth-filled narratives, so that we can understand that our fight for reparation is a transnational fight, right? From North America here in the United States, and I say North America because I want to include Canada too, to the southern tip of Africa. And all this debacle, all this shows, in the Oval Office, or what MAGA is trying to do is to distract us, from the real work of reparations. That's why, as a Black immigrant in the United States, I am 100% in support of reparations. Why? Because I understand that has to happen in South Africa, too. And we've got to make sure that transnational connection, collaboration, and conscientization is not broken, you see, by the ignorance and the arrogance, of Trumpocracy and the MAGA movement.
Yeah. You say ignorance. One last point on the whole colored thing. I mean, when I go into the Apartheid Museum, I was really amazed at the term chameleon. Basically, in census time, I might be colored in census this year, but 10 years later, I might be Black. And if I get stopped by the police and they put the pencil in my hair, and the pencil doesn't catch, are they going to designate me as colored, even though I'm Black? It's just really ignorant, the system that they had in there, ignorant, hateful, cruel. And that's why it's such a hypocrisy that Trump would sit there and challenge the South African president, confront him, ambush him with all of these images, because the oppression that these white South Africans exerted over history, over time, it's brutal, it's murderous, it's devilish, sinful, and I don't have any more words, but I'll probably come up with some a little later.
It's immoral, it's dehumanizing, and frankly, it's unacceptable. And we, in this day and age, we got to call it for what it is, and that is white supremacy is getting desperate, because, of whatever danger they are seeing, right? Okay, at one point it was the red danger, the Black danger, right? Now it's the immigrant danger. You see what I'm saying? It's really, in so many ways, a combination, Greg, of the politics of fear and the politics of grievance. That's what MAGA is all based on: the politics of fear, the politics of grievance, the politics of dehumanization, the politics of division, the politics of discrimination, around that. And this MAGA movement is acting, out of desperation. So they'll do whatever they can, and what was displayed really is just the who's really the danger is when arrogance, you see, and ignorance team up. You get what you see, happening in the White House, right now, because we're dealing with a president that's too arrogant to admit his ignorance, and he's too ignorant to know that he's arrogant.
Man, Pastor Sauls, thank you for joining me today. You knew we had to get on this one. We had to get on it quick too. I could not believe it.
Well, you hit me up. I said, let me shift some things, because. And as we said in the first one, we will do this, over and over again, and maybe some of the listeners can kind of let us know what are some of the future topics, that we can check in on. But I really want to encourage us that as we talk about it, it has to be, how do we engage in what I would call Pan-African proximation? You see. So that we can understand, as Dr. King said, that our liberation is inextricably linked, and that's why when we, started the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, as the co-founder, I was clear, right, that the immigrant rights movement in the United States must connect with the unfinished agenda of the civil rights movement, and through that co-create, right, a global human rights movement. It's because of just this deep sense of mutuality, that King, talked about, as well as what we talk about in South Africa, which is Ubuntu. And look, when I was trying to process what was happening, with this ambush and this theater, right, in the White House, I just couldn't help but really call on our ancestor, James Baldwin. Help me, Lord. And James Baldwin, just shouted at me, the following words, right, that I would like to share, with our siblings as part of this audience. It is certain, in any case, that ignorance, and I can add arrogance, allied with power, is the most ferocious enemy that, and I add, racial justice can have. That's what we saw, on display, and it really, I think lifts up, right, the transnational urgency of now around, organizing and mobilizing for Pan-African proclamation, so we can move towards our collective liberation.
All right, we're gonna end it right there. That's so profound there, Pastor Sauls. Thank you so much. We're going to continue to put content out there as we stand with South Africa. Brothers and sisters, we just don't want you to forget that the brothers and sisters over there have experienced oppression in a very, very real way. And, that's trying, we don't know we'll fall for the okie doke that we're being fed through Western media. But truth is truth. These are things that happen. And, these are perspectives that happen, and they're trying to reintroduce or amplify, I guess I should say, not reintroduce, but amplify the white supremacist philosophies and thoughts right here in American society. Yeah, and I just say forward ever, backward never.
Yebo.
Yebo. All right. Thank you, Pastor Sauls.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it, brother.
Yes, sir.
Hey, time. Yes. One love.
Peace and blessings. Yes, you can get Coffee Conversations with Greg J on Facebook, all over the place. Coffee Conversations with Greg J. You also can go to Beach City Radio, beachcityradio.com, and that's where we're located there. We'll repurpose the audio for audio podcasts wherever you get your favorite podcast. And of course, we're on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to Coffee Conversations with Greg J playlist, and you'll be notified every time we post a new episode of Coffee Conversations with Greg J. And by all means, always remember, love one another. Peace and blessings.